Hello, and welcome to Esoterica and Nonsense, a podcast where we discuss myths, legends, folk tales, fairy tales, supernatural phenomenon, and religions from around the world. I am your host, Annabelle, and I am reporting from Pepper World headquarters, and today we are discussing animal familiars. It is spooky season. It is Scorpio season officially. Today marks the first day of Scorpio season. I am recording this on October 22nd. Scorpio season is the time when the veil is the thinnest between realms. And as I say this, the neighborhood peppers have begun barking. I have learned to change my microphone to a better setting, so perhaps you're not hearing them bark, but I assure you they are barking. Yes, ma'am. My favorite part about Scorpio season is how magical it is. What does it mean that the veil is thinner between realms? This is harvest season. It's also a time, if you think about the zodiac as birth into rebirth. Death is an important phase, but it's not the end. After death comes a transformation and then an ascension, and then, of course, back into rebirth. So I like to think of Scorpio season as death season. But what death season really is transformation season, such as the chrysalis stage of a butterfly, when a caterpillar becomes a cocoon, a chrysalis, before becoming a butterfly. It is the Scorpio moment. Am I making any sense, or am I just rambling like a crazy person? Before we get into it, I do want to share this really interesting idea that I absorbed today through TikTok. Um, I've been scrolling the interwebs, and now my TikTok feed is all about manifestation and what have you. But I found this really interesting woman who I don't remember her name, and she was talking about a method that I also don't remember, but I remember what the method is, so I will share it with you. She was talking about this method where you relive memories and re-script them, like you rewrite them. So it's not about like erasing memories, but it's about changing the outcome of a memory into something you desire. And so it's really anyway, she was telling all these stories about these memories that she had rewritten. And then her family, or like the people around her, started experiencing her, like when they would bring up family memories, they would be the revision memories. I think maybe that's what she called it, like memory revisions. And so she was saying that her idea of reality had become warped because she had understood this idea that time isn't real. But then she started playing with her past. And by making decisions of like rewriting her past to be basically to have like conflict resolution between people or to even manifest things she wanted in the past, she was rewriting her present and then rewriting her future. Really fascinating stuff. And I can't stop thinking about it. I just learned about this today. So I'm going to dabble more into that and I will keep you updated. But, babe, let us begin. Let us talk about animal familiars. I chose this topic because I thought it would be perfect for spooky season. I think we all think about like the black cat, for example. We think about witches having black cats or having toads or sorcerers communicating with animals or communicating through animals. We're going to get into that today because you'd be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't be. But this is a worldwide phenomenon. And it's not too crazy to believe because human beings are a part of Earth. We are a part of nature, and we all have a telepathic inner net. There's the internet and there's the internet. And we are all connected through the internet just by being alive on this planet. All things alive on this planet are tapped into our internet, and it's up to us to tap in. So, of course, let us begin with Mesoamerica. I think one of the most famous terms of the Americas is the nahual. The nahual is a animal totem, an animal spirit. In lots of Central America, instead of asking your zodiac, people will ask your nahual, and your nahual is um, given to you on your birthday. It's determined by the day you were born. However, that term nahual is a much older word, and it really refers to like the spirit of an animal. There's also the tonal and the wayob or the waichara. I could be saying that wrong. Oh, wise. Here in the Yucatan, people refer to them as wise. Uh, wise or waichara. Fuck, I think I'm saying that wrong. I'll just say why. Are a similar idea, like the entity of an animal that one could peer into. Okay, bear with me. So there's also many other names for this concept, but these are the big ones. And for now, we're gonna say nahual because I think it's like I hear it used the most. But again, this is a very common word in the area of Mexico. So there are many other terms that could be used in North America, Central America, or even within Mexico, just to be clear. So it was believed in many parts of Mesoamerica that every person was born with an animal spirit twin. This would be known as a tonal or a Y. This essentially, or a nahual. This would be an animal linked to one's birth sign, to one's destiny, and to one's soul. Sorcerers who could consciously merge with their animal counterpart were considered to be nahuals. Okay? So this is what we're talking about, like how we're using the word. Sometimes the word is used for these animal spirits, but they could also be used for a person who was able to merge with their animal counterpart. So these people, nahuales, were considered to be some of the most powerful sorcerers, healers, and shapeshifters. Or in our colonized English language, we would use the word shaman. If you're new here, I try my best not to use the word shaman, only because I am doing my best to decolonize my language, and shaman is a made up word that derives from the Siberian word saman that Dutch travelers went to Siberia and watched the locals mispronounced their word for sorcerer and misspelled it, mispronounced it, and now has become a word for all cultures. And I just choose not to use it. But you know what? English is a colonizer language, so maybe this is a fool's errand. If you have not heard of Carlos Castaneda, that was a great transition. Carlos Castaneda was a writer who was Mexican American, and he was, I believe, raised in Los Angeles. He went to UCLA, and he was studying to be a geologist in the 70s. And he ended up going on a field trip to Arizona to study the red rocks. And on his field trip, was he kept thinking about peyote, and he was just so interested in peyote, and he wanted to learn about it. And so he thought to himself, maybe I should talk to some locals or like, talk to some native people to see if they know anything. And so on the last day of his field trip, he went to a gas station and he saw a native man there. And so he started speaking to him in Spanish, and he asked him if he knew anything about peyote. And the man smiled and he said, "It's so funny that you asked that because the man that you want to talk to is sitting right across the street." So, right across the street at this bus stop was this little old, teeny tiny man. And Carlos went across the street to talk to him, and he asked him about peyote. And this man just stared at him and smiled. And Carlos was like, "Well, like, I just want to know about peyote. Do you know about peyote?" And this man just smiled at him. He was this old man. Finally, this old man said, "If you want to know about peyote, I live up this dirt road, and you can come find me tomorrow." And Carlos was like, I don't, well, I have to go back to UCLA tomorrow. I don't know. Like, I want to talk now. And the man is like, well, you can either come to my house up this dirt road tomorrow or never see me again. And so Carlos, of course, decided not to go back to UCLA the next day, and he went to go meet with this man. And they started a 20-year friendship, and Carlos wrote a whole bunch of books about it, and I highly recommend reading them. I'm bringing this up because in this friendship, he begins with this old man whose name is Don Juan. Don Juan is a nahual, and he is able to merge his consciousness with animals. It's easier for him to merge into a crow, which is considered to be like the baseline. It's like considered to be one of the easier animals. But one of his contemporaries, who I actually don't remember his name, but basically one of his friends who's also a nahual, is able to merge his consciousness with a jaguar, which is considered to be one of the most advanced capabilities. And I highly recommend reading those books if you haven't. And again, I am just a reporter doing my best to gather you information through the internet and through the things that I know through my own research. But it's always more interesting to learn this from the real deal, to learn this from people who have practiced these traditions from real masters. I think the most learned people in the world are the people that studied oral traditions from ancient masters. And there's just no compensating for that. This is us just having tea time and pontificating. So, that being said, the jaguars or the panteras are considered to be the supreme symbol of sorcery and power. They are associated with the underworld, the night sun. The jaguar could move between the worlds. They can hunt in darkness. Mayan kings wore jaguar pelts during ceremonies to become living embodiments of Tezcatlipoca or Balam, the jaguar lords of the underworld. Mm-hmm. And that's no surprise. I think all of us who've interacted with a cat knows that they are supreme beings. They can travel between realms. They are spirits. And so I theoretically, if one was to be incredibly powerful, you could merge your consciousness with them and exist within their body. It's real life, babe. Also, another honorable mention is the owl. The owl is the messenger of death and of sorcery. They were called tecoloitl. The owl's cry was seen as an omen, but for the initiated, it was the voice of hidden wisdom. Sorcerers might don owl feathers to travel through realms. Interestingly, across many tribes of North America, from the Hopi and the Navajo of the Southwest to the Lakota, Cherokee, and Apache, the owl is seen not as an ordinary animal, but as a spirit messenger from the other world. The owls are not what they seem. It embodies the mystery of the night, the unseen, the ancestral, and the hidden forces of fate. But with that power comes ambivalence. The owl can bring prophecy and guidance. It's neither good nor evil, but a dangerous, sacred power that must be treated with awe and respect. Interestingly, in some traditions of North America, the eyes of an owl, or specifically making eye contact with an owl, would be considered dangerous or not for the weak. Shout out to Res Reservation Dogs, which is a great show. And in every episode, if there is an owl, they always blur the eyes, which is iconic. The idea being, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, the idea is that owls can see what humans cannot, and they can see between realms. Their eyes pierce through the dark, they pierce through the place of spirits, of dreams, and the dead. It is believed that to look an owl directly in the eye is to risk calling that sight upon yourself, to invite the visions of death or spiritual burdens the owl carries. The eyes are portals. Meeting them is a kind of exchange. If you are seen not just physically but spiritually, the owl may claim your essence or deliver a message you are not ready to hear. Some nations say that if you stare into an owl's eyes, you invite it to follow your soul, or you allow it to count your days. Others believe it to be a test. If you hold its gaze too long, your spirit might not come fully back from that contact. This stuff gives me chills. I wonder, can I do an owl call? No, I can only do a pigeon call. I wish I could do a bird call for you guys. So, interestingly, in many different tribes across North America, their owls are associated with death, protection of the dead, with the essence of spirits, with the messenger of fallen warriors, the knowledge of darkness, the knowledge of night, and the announcement of death. I find this to be so fascinating because growing up in a city that is colonized, I did not grow up with any of this information, but why is it that we do associate owls with spookiness? Why is it that being out in the forest at night, we think of the owl staring into our soul? You know what I'm saying? Like, this is real shit. This is real shit, you guys. Also, I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably already are with me. Like, if anything that indigenous people to any land believe, it's some real shit, idiots. Okay, so now, honorable mention. Not only are owls associated with night, but in some North American tribes, owls are associated with skinwalkers and sorcery. People who use what is considered to be dark magic or dark medicine and transform into animals. The owl, moving silently and seeing in the dark, became a natural symbol for these shapeshifters who are using darker magic. All that really means is magic to hurt. In the Navajo and Apache folklore, witches can take owl form to spy, to curse, or to steal spiritual power. Hence, if an owl watches a house for several nights or meets someone's gaze, it is often read as a sign that a witch has sent it or a curse is near. So while owls are taboo for the uninitiated, magical people, sorcerers, would be allowed to work with owls for healing, for prophecy, and for protection. They do so with ceremony and never casually. So, for example, they may keep the feathers of an owl for diagnosing sicknesses. They may be wrapped or hidden, never displayed openly, because their energy is too powerful. Bones or talons were used in a trance state during death rites, symbolizing the ability to see beyond the veil. If a person who was considered to not be a sorcerer had an owl feather, they were often instructed to leave it where they found it. To take it was an invite of the burden of its knowledge, knowledge that one may not be ready for. And we all know that the white settlers took all the fucking owl feathers. Oh, fuck. Let's take a break. Hi, it's me, Annabelle. And if you've made it this far, I appreciate you so much. Please like and subscribe my channel, my page. I have so many kinds of content and I'm working on new kinds. You may be listening to me just through my podcast or through YouTube. You should check out my YouTube if you're not watching or listening to me there. I have meditation videos. I have yoga videos coming soon. I have my full length podcast. I'm doing short episodes. I'm doing shorts. And soon I'm going to be having listener episodes. So, like, subscribe. Thanks, babe. Love you. Next up, we have some other incredibly powerful and honorable mentions from the Americas. The eagle and hawk were also animals that were considered to be portals or openings to the other world. The eagle was considered to be a messenger between the earth and sky. Its feathers were sacred tools of prayer. When raised, they carried human intentions to the Creator. To find an eagle feather was to be touched by a spirit. Also, the coyote, known as a trickster, a teacher, and a mirror. The coyote brought chaos to reveal truth. Sorcerers invoked coyote energy to outwit illness or deceit. Also, the bear, known as the bringer of light. According to many Northwest Coast peoples, a shapeshifter and a creator raven could travel between realms. Black feathers and carved totems invoked its wit and insight. Oops, sorry. I just jumped through my notes. I just jumped through to the raven. Okay, what I meant to say about the bear is that bear claws and teeth were worn by healers and used during healing rites. And then, of course, the most honorable mention would be the raven. The ravens are considered to be the bringer of light, and they were considered shapeshifters. This is seems to be common all around the world. Ravens as shapeshifters and windows into other dimensions. Another honorable mention, though, would be the hummingbird. The hummingbird is considered to be a window between portals and a bringer of light. Interestingly, I've heard that in some native populations to the Amazon, they believed that the creator of the universe was a hummingbird, which I love, and I like to believe that too. In Portuguese, the word for hummingbird is beija-flor, which means kiss flower, like flower kisser. And so I love to think of the creator of the universe being a mother hummingbird named beija-flor. And then, last but not least, we must mention the wolf. In the native cultures, wolves were considered to be a symbol of loyalty and instinct. They hunted in packs. They symbolized unity and family. And if you were to dream of a wolf, this often marked an initiation into deeper spiritual connection. However, from what I've heard and researched, the most common forms to transform into would be the raven and the jaguar, the windows into other dimensions. Now, there is some um, crossover here, and we'll see this around the world, as there always is. But next up, I want to talk about the Celtic traditions. In Northern Europe, from the Celts and the Druids, animals were not just symbols, they were portals into the other world. Each animal embodied divine traits and could act as a familiar, or what they called a fetch, a spiritual double that accompanied one between realms. The common animals that people would create a merging consciousness with would be the stag. The stag was considered to be a gatekeeper, appearing at twilight. The stag guided souls between worlds. Its antlers were the tree of life in miniature form, growth, death, and rebirth. Also was the boar. The boar was a symbol of courage, of ferocity, and sacred feasting. Warriors sought the boar's blessing before battle. Boar tusks were carved into talisman of endurance. And interestingly, a lot of, oh, I just kicked my camera, whoopsies. A lot of the helmets that we think of, the Viking helmets with the horns, were often boar, uh, what's the word? Tusks. They're boar tusks. I think we often don't think about that. We always look at those horned helmets and just are like, oh, those are horns. But they're the tusks of a boar. Hmm. And then, of course, we have the raven. In the Celtic tradition, ravens were prophecies of death. The Morrigan, who is the goddess of war and fate, took their form to oversee battlefields. To see a raven circling was to know destiny approached. Interestingly, another animal that was considered to be an animal familiar was the salmon. They were symbols of wisdom and memory. The salmon of knowledge granted prophecy and a mythic version of consuming one's familiar to absorb its essence. Mm. Okay, so this was about absorbing the essence of a thing by eating it. And I do find this to be really interesting. This actually reminds me of a dream I had. This is like so off the rails, but I once had a dream where I was in this liminal white space. And I actually used to dream about this all the time as a toddler. And it was like my worst nightmare. It was like this white realm of nothingness that went on forever. But when I was in my 20s, I had a dream that I was back in this realm, but it was almost water. So I was falling through it and it was really murky and like misty. And I couldn't see anything. I was just falling through this like thick white mist. But I was psychically connected with at least six other people. And they were terrified because we were being pursued by this like sea monster. And we were definitely in the spirit realm. So the people I was telepathically connected to kept thinking like, we have to keep going. We have to keep going. We can't let it catch us. And I remember thinking and telling the group like, we have nothing to fear. If this monster eats us, we will become a part of its body. Like we have nothing to worry about. And then we'll all become one. It's kind of poetic. And they were like, no, are you kidding me? They were not feeling my proposition. But that kind of reminds me of this. Like, I think this was true in a lot of ancient indigenous cultures. The idea of eating another animal or even eating a plant was to absorb its essence and to absorb its power. And I do think that's a beautiful and interesting angle on the animal familiar. Then, last but not least, in the Celtic tradition was the hound. Dogs were also considered to be guides into the underworld, and Celtic hunters believed that loyal dogs would follow them into death, ensuring safe passage. Unsurprisingly, this belief lasted for hundreds of years, as all things do. Usually, indigenous beliefs make their way into the future, even through colonization. And I do recommend listening to an episode I did about black dogs. And I talk about this idea of the grim, this idea of black dogs being associated with the underworld. This is common in a lot of parts of the world. I go into it in depth in my episode, but just to speak about um, Northern Europe specifically, like England, the black dog became associated with fear because to see a dog became a symbol of your death was coming. However, this comes from the more ancient belief that dogs would follow you into the afterlife because they were so loyal. Sadly, though, because of colonization and Christianification, they started killing dogs that were black out of fear. And then, get this was like total witchcraft. They believed that even though they feared black dogs, that by having a black dog protect a cemetery, you would be safer to go into the afterlife. And they basically believed that the first body buried in any cemetery became like a caretaker for the other bodies. So anytime in England, this is fucking true. Back in the medieval era, when they were building churches, they would kill a black dog and bury it in the cemetery to protect the future humans buried there. And this kind of drives me crazy because that is literal sacrifice. That's like literal blood magic. What? How can you outlaw magic and then sacrifice living things to become ghosts to protect other things? Like what? That's like literal sorcery, bro. What? What are you talking about? That's crazy town. So, this is another reason why I'm just obsessively researching this stuff on my free time and reporting back to you because I feel like I'm like uncovering clues. I'm uncovering clues of all of these weird random beliefs that society seems to have. And of course, this spans across the planet and it spans across cultures. But we all have these beliefs that we think are ours, these beliefs that sometimes feel logical, but they're often reinforced through genetic memory, they're enforced through cultural memory, and they're enforced through cultural normalcy. But I have always wondered, where do these things come from? You know, why are black cats considered unlucky? I'll spoil it for you. We're going to get there, but black cats are considered to be windows into other portals because some cultures claimed that they could jump into the bodies of cats and see between realms. And so then, of course, through the church, they started fearing these animals and seeing them as the work of the devil, blah, 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 blah. Just as the black dog is now seen as a bad omen, when before they were just seen as a loyal friend to go with you into the afterlife. Like, do you see where I'm coming from? Like, this, it's fucking deep, you guys. So, in the Celtic practice, people known as druids or sorcerers would wear animal cloaks and antlered headdresses during magical rites. They would use feathers and bones, and they would weave these things into staffs. And these staffs, interestingly, were sometimes called spirits. Mm. On Samhain, which is the ancient equivalent of Halloween, familiars crossed freely between the worlds. The thin time when witches could speak to their fetch or their animal familiar. See? And this is what's interesting. In the Celtic tradition, their animal familiars were in the spirit world. So they were working with animal spirits, not necessarily living animals. The Celtic revivalists still invoke animal totems in ritual, and modern witches see the fetch or the familiar as a psychic familiar that guards the witch's astral body. Mm. Mm. And unsurprisingly, there are so many similarities to those practices as with the ones from the indigenous people of the Americas. And now let's touch upon the Slavic and Siberian shapeshifters, sorcerers, and animal familiars. In the vast forests of Eastern Europe and in Siberia, sorcerers believed that every human possessed multiple souls, one of which could leave the body in the form of an animal. Initiation often involved spirit dismemberment, being symbolically torn apart and rebuilt with the bones of beasts. The common animals that were considered sacred transformation animals in this part of the world were the bear, the wolf, the horse, and birds. So the bear is considered an ancestor and a guardian. Among the Finno-Ugric, the Siberian peoples, the bear was considered the grandfather, revered as a former human. Bear skulls were kept in shrines, and hunters addressed them with ritual songs. The wolf was considered a protector and initiator. The witches of the Slavic tradition were said to ride wolves at night. In Siberia, the wolf was a guide between realms. Its pelt was used for journeying magic. And the horse was considered the mount of the soul. Sorcerers rode invisible horses during trance states to travel the world and to travel the world tree. Horse bones and skulls were placed into graves to aid passage. And birds, specifically the eagle and the owl, were considered to be the flight of the soul. Sorcerers would drum, and they often would paint or depict bird images. They used feathers that were a symbol of the ascent into the upper world. And I mean, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that around the world, it's very similar animals with very similar overlaps. Because it's real shit. I'm sorry. Fight me on this. Comment below if you want to fight me. So, specifically in this part of the world, animal bones were considered to be central items into sorcery. They would use drums made from bones and the hide of animals, specifically reindeer. They would use rattles made of antlers, and they would use claws as amulets and jewelry. During trance states, the sorcerer's familiar, often a bird or a bear, would appear and carry them into the spirit realm. Even to this day, modern Siberian sorcerers still speak of their spirit mounts, animal familiars who appear in dreams or in ceremonies, proving the lineage of this ancient animism still lives. This just really touches my heart. It touches my heart, the legacy of humanity. I think it's easy to forget being raised within colonization. Colonization has touched so much of the world and has grown like a virus within the minds of our ancestors and now into us. But all of us, every single one of us, have ancestors who were talking with the earth. They were talking with the plants and they were talking with the animals. And what a profound belief to believe that your soul and the souls of animals are commingling within your own body and within the spirit world. To be able to take your soul and jump into the body of another. Like these are like, this does not sound crazy to me at all. But into the culture of colonization, these are radical ideas. These are like unbelievable ideas. And it's so sad that colonization has erased these memories, but it's so beautiful to me. It's so exciting to me that we come from a human legacy of loving the earth. We come from a human legacy of communing with plants and animals as a part of ourselves. And instead of killing for the sake of killing, to think of absorbing the life of another into your own, or as you die, to be absorbed into the life of another. This idea that we're all connected and that we are all commingling souls. Like, how beautiful. And it's true. I know this to be true. I've done enough mushrooms to know that this is 100% true. And it makes me I find peace. I find peace doing this research and realizing that every single ancient culture had such an experience of connection because it gives me faith in humanity. I've done a lot of traveling and I have found that most people are beautiful, kind people. And it's actually a small percentage of people that really spoil it for the rest of us. But ultimately, that's really not, those are odds that we can work with. We come from beautiful ancestors who lived in a brutal environment with not a lot of luxury, and yet talked of the beauty of earth and talked of the power of the spirit, not just within ourselves, but within all living things. And I think this is important. And I think if we're so easy to trust a book that some white guy wrote, why can we not be easy to trust the thousands and thousands of years of beliefs that our ancestors had? Just a thought. Let's take a break. Esoterica and Nonsense wants to hear from you. We have listener episodes coming, and I want to tell your story. Maybe you've had a really freaky dream. Maybe you had some crazy religious experience. Maybe you grew up in a cult. Maybe you actually just have some random stories that your grandma used to tell you growing up. Maybe you just want to share something random with me. The floodgates are open. Please email in your story at esotericaandnonsense@gmail.com. Any story that comes to your mind, I want to hear it, even if you just want to say hi. We love that. We are all for it. And get ready for some listener episodes coming soon. So, next step, baby boy, I want to talk about some of the animism, animal familiars within the world of Africa. Now, granted, we are covering a lot of parts of the world. So I hate being this guy who's just saying like Mesoamerica. And now I'm just saying Africa. Africa is a fucking continent. It is the biggest continent. And um, so I am going to talk about specific regions, but I also just want to be clear. I hear this thrown around all the time. Like Africa is a huge continent. So I apologize. I wish I could make each episode 10 hours, but I just feel like that would be a little crazy. So if you ever want more details on a specific topic, feel free to email in. So, throughout the continent of Africa, animals were seen as manifestations of Ashe, the divine life force. Each deity or ancestral spirit had its animal counterpart, acting as both companion and messenger. So, the biggest and most common animal familiars of the African continent are the serpent or the python. In Dahomey and Benin, the python embodied Da, the serpent of creation. It represented the rainbow bridge between earth and sky. Priests kept live pythons in temples. Touching one brought blessings. Also, another common familiar is the lion or leopard, which is basically the jaguar. Obviously, in Africa, lions and leopards were more common, big cats. But again, these are cats. I just hear cat. When I hear jaguar, when I hear lion, when I hear leopard, I just hear cat. Okay? Same, but different, babe. So, these big cats were considered to be royalty and ancestral power. The kings of the ancient Benin kept leopard skins as regalia, symbolizing control of the wild. Sorcerers invoked the leopard spirits in rites of protection. Also, unsurprisingly, many warriors would wear the skins of a leopard or a lion as a symbol of power. And again, this kind of reminds me of this idea from the Celtic tradition of like absorbing the energy of that creature by eating it, by ingesting it, you are absorbing it. And so this is like a nuanced experience of animal familiar. It's not necessarily just psychically merging your consciousness. Like you could actually be like taking on their body. Also, unsurprisingly, owls and vultures were seen as familiars as well. Again, owl baby. Like you can't make this up. So, owls and vultures were seen as messengers of the night. Their feathers were used for divination and for the flight of the soul. And also the ram. The ram is linked to thunder gods such as Shango. We should do an episode on Shango. The ram is a symbol of power, virility, and lightning. Horns were kept as ritual vessels. And so it was very common all throughout Africa, the continent of Africa, for people to be using animal bones, hair, feathers, and to the idea that all of these things were infused with spirits. So these things would be considered power figures. People who did divination would cast bones or cowrie shells to communicate with ancestral familiars. Blood offerings returned vitality to the spirits that aided healers. These relationships survived the transatlantic diaspora, re-emerging in hoodoo traditions, Santeria, where the black cat, the snake, and the rooster all serve as bridges between magic and the divine. And so, unsurprisingly, even though in every culture there's animals that were very common, like I think the ones that we're circling back to the most is like the owl, the raven, cats in general. Um, those are like almost in every culture. But ultimately, I think what I am picking up is that it has nothing to do, like the species of the animal may not matter. Like it may have to do more with the person and their intention and their practice. This idea of animism, this idea that all consciousness is shared and that we are a woven tapestry of consciousness itself. And by interacting or eating or meditating with an animal, our consciousnesses are weaving together. And this is true biologically as well. All of our bodies are made of molecules that were once a part of something else. There's hydrogen molecules and carbon molecules, and there's all kinds of atoms within my body that are creating molecules. And before I was born, before I was Annabelle, those molecules were inside of my mom, but where were they before? They could have been a part of an ancient plant. They could have been a part of an ancient panther. They could have been a part of an owl. They could have been a part of a large ancient river that doesn't exist. Like all of the atoms that live within my body now come from all over Earth. They come from all over the multiverse. Like all of our atoms and molecules are being shared. So we really are being woven together, literally and figuratively, as above, so below, right? Come on, I know you get me. I know you get me. So now I would love to talk about some of the honorable mentions from Asia. The big classics of Japan, which we have touched on some of these before, are the fox, the crow, and the cat. The fox in Japan is known as the kitsune. Now, the cool thing about Japan is that because they closed their borders during a pivotal time of like an industrial revolution on Earth, they kept a lot of their indigenous culture longer than many other places. And animism and what they consider Shintoism, this idea that nature is alive, was preserved so much better than most other countries because most other countries were touched by colonization so much sooner. So what's interesting is that in Japan, from what I understand, there is a distinction between a regular fox and like a spirit fox. And I think this is true with a lot of animals. There's like regular animals, and then there's like spirit animals who are almost like yokai. They're like spirits, they're entities. Okay, so the fox, known as the kitsune, is considered to be the servant of the rice deity Inari Okami, who we just covered a few episodes ago. Inari is a non-binary icon, aka my best friend. I happen to know Inari Okami has incarnated on Earth right now, if you didn't know. They happen to be one of my BFFs. The kitsune, the fox, is considered to be intelligent, a shapeshifter, and able to possess humans. To feed a fox or build a shrine invited Inari's blessings. So basically, you could either feed a fox or build a shrine for Inari, and this would bring you blessings from her. Witches, known as the kitsune sukai, kept spirit foxes in invisible forms as familiars. So we're talking about invisible foxes now as animal familiars. Fuck yeah. Another honorable mention of Japan is the crow, known as the tengu. The tengu were warrior spirits with beaks and wings. They were once demons and later became teachers of discipline and sword skill. Monks sought their blessing for flight or invisibility during meditation. See, like this is real shit. Like this is worldwide, baby. This is world fucking wide. And then of course we have the cat, often known as the bakeneko or the nekomata. Cats with spiritual power were considered to be the most powerful animal familiar. They danced with lanterns or whispered the dead secrets. Offering fish or rice would keep them on your good side. There's stories of cats doing all kinds of crazy things and being tricksters and liars. I do have a two-part episode about cats, which I highly recommend, but there are some wild stories. The difference between the bakeneko and the nekomata are interesting, and essentially the nekomata is considered to be a two-tailed cat, and the bakeneko is considered to be a more naughty, like malevolent cat. But like we could talk about this for hours, but I just do think that like what really gets me going, what really gets me excited about all of this is the similarities. Like, this is what really gets me going. It's almost like every culture has basically the exact same beliefs. Obviously, not the exact, but it is wild and beautiful that these beliefs span across the world. Like, you can't fight me on this. Like, this is real life. How, if everyone believes this, come on. And they're not even talking to each other, like, this is real. Okay, next up we have China. In China, there's also a fox spirit known as the Huli Jing, the nine-tailed fox that gains power with age. It could serve as a sorcerer or seduce mortals to absorb their chi. That really makes us think of Naruto. You know what I'm saying? And also, speaking of Naruto, this idea of the Jinjuriki being an animal familiar is another really amazing concept. If you're not familiar with Naruto, it's amazing. And so in the Naruto universe, there's these entities, these powerful animals, which are taken from human mythology, from Chinese and Japanese mythology. And there are these people, essentially, they're called tailed beasts. And these tailed beasts, there's nine of them. There's a one-tailed beast, a two-tailed beast, a three-tailed beast, and so on and so forth, right? And they are considered to be dangerous and powerful, and so very skilled ninjas, or basically people who have control over their own energy, their own chi, have trapped these tailed beasts within human bodies so that they can be controlled and aren't considered a liability. And then those people are then considered jinjurikis. The people with these magical entities who live inside them become jinjurikis. And so the plot of Naruto, it's an amazing show, is about this young boy whose parents trap the most powerful tailed beast, the nine-tailed beast, who's a nine-tailed fox. They trap the nine-tailed beast inside of their baby son. And in doing so, they actually end up dying. But the baby survives. And so he grows up as an orphan with this, what, the most powerful spirit in the world living in his body. And he has to learn how to befriend it. And he has to learn how to understand it and gain its trust so that he can start using its power. And it's fascinating and amazing because the show Naruto uses real mythology. And I think it's such a special show because it's a reimagining of perhaps like the things that our ancestors believed, of how they interacted with animals. And I think that's like the biggest takeaway that I want you to get from this episode. I think through television and movies, when we think of animal familiars, I think we think of like witches with pointy hats being like, Dapple, Dapple, Doyle in trouble. And they like talk to cats or some shit. Or like their cats are their sidekicks. But from what we're learning, it seems as if these animals aren't their sidekicks at all. It seems as if they're interweaving their consciousnesses together, thus becoming more powerful. Because what's more powerful than one? Two. And this is like what's so beautiful about art. We can use art to help share an idea so much easier than just information, you know? Like sometimes I think when I'm reading my notes, like this feels really stale and like kind of hard to understand. And I really want to make this as interesting as I can because this stuff fascinates me, but I do get it. Sometimes when I'm reading my notes, this is like fucking boring. You know, maybe I'm just in my head. Write a comment. Tell me how you feel about how I deliver my notes. But ultimately, like art can really help us absorb the true thoughts of another person, the true thoughts of another culture, the true thoughts of our ancestors. And it seems as if what I'm getting from all of this research that I've done is that our ancestors across the entire globe were communing with the spirits of Earth. They were interweaving their minds and consciousnesses with animals and plants. And I think it's hard for us to wrap our heads around that because we've been trained to believe that's not possible. We've been trained to believe that we should never do that. We're raised in cities where we're not really even seeing nature. We're seeing photos of nature or going on a weekend trip to nature, but they don't They don't really want us to be in nature. They don't want us talking to plants and animals. They don't want us to even think that's possible. But we all have been there. I know, I don't care who you are. I know you've like spent enough time with somebody's dog or somebody's cat. Maybe you have your own dog or your own cat, and you've had moments where you can hear their thoughts. You know what they're fucking thinking, and they know what you're thinking. That's easy for them. But there's been moments when you've been able to tap in with an animal, like it's real life. And obviously the next step would be interweaving. That's not child's play. Like that's for the master. But it's seeming that every single culture was doing this shit. So we're just late to the party. And it's not our fault. We've been colonized. Colonization has been spreading like a fucking virus. And it's just lame. But we can decide to change anytime we want. Let's start to fucking talking to animals and plants. Hello? That's what I want to do. Okay. On that note, next up in the Chinese pantheon, we have the dragon. The dragon was considered to be a familiar only to kings, an imperial familiar. It was believed that the king of China was an actual embodiment of the yellow dragon. Interesting. So, in a way, instead of the emperor being a human with a dragon familiar, it's almost as if the king is a dragon with a human familiar. Fascinating. Also, Taoist priests would use the dragon imagery on talismans to channel thunder and rain. See? And then, of course, there's the crane. In China, the crane was a symbol of longevity and transcendence. The crane feathers were used in alchemy and in meditation practices to symbolize the ascent. I'm telling you. Also, there is another nine-tailed fox in Korea. I mean, ultimately, I think the nine-tailed fox in Japan, China, and Korea are the same. China and Korea did a lot of colonization of each other and within Japan. So there's a lot of overlapping, obviously, with a lot of like different entities. But in Korea, the nine-tailed fox is known as the gumiho. And the nine-tailed fox was a symbol, or was thought to believe that it wanted to become a human through good deeds. So it was seen as both a familiar and as a moral allegory for good deeds bringing upon a reward. Also, interestingly, in Korea is their belief of the tiger being familiar. Again, a cat. The tiger was considered to be a guardian of the mountains. Sorcerers would invoke the tiger spirit for courage and protection. And tiger pelts were worn during ritual spaces. I'm telling you, everyone's wearing cat pelts. No, fuck. Oh my God, you guys, I got too excited and I just wove my hand around and I just knocked down my ashtray. Oh my God. I have like two bundles of sage that I've been burning and I have this like special ashtray just for my sage. I just knocked it off the table and it's made a huge disgusting mess. Damn it. I talk with my hands, you guys. Let's take a quick break. Are you a fan of the podcast and want everyone to know? Well, guess what? We have merch live. There are sweatshirts, t-shirts, tank tops, water bottles, stickers, all kinds of things. There's also some other like random fun things of my personal art. But why not get a tote bag, a tumbler, and a hoodie to tell the world that you listen to the pod? Check it out. There's a link in the description of this video and a link in the description of my podcast and channel. Check me out, babe. So, next up, our honorable mention is India. In the Hindu and Tantric traditions, every god had what is known a vahana. The vahana is a sacred animal mount that expresses the power of said god. Humans too could attune to these energies through mantra, meditation, or ritual offerings. So, for example, Durga was depicted riding a lion, the fearless power and divine wrath. Devotees of Durga would invoke a lion to overcome enemies and inner demons. Also, Ganesha is depicted on a mouse. The mouse represents the ability to move through obstacles silently, intelligence, and adaptable. Saraswati is depicted on a swan. The swan is a symbol of discernment and purity. It separates milk from water, a symbol of wisdom. And Shiva is depicted on a bull, a symbol of strength, devotion, and cosmic stability. And then, of course, Lakshmi is depicted on an owl, the ability to see through darkness, insight in matters of fortune. In tantric rites, practitioners meditated on animal forms to embody divine energy known as Shakti. Animal bones, horns, and skulls were used in cremation ground rituals to channel transformation and fearlessness. The Vahana tradition continues. Statues, temples, carvings, and modern pujas still honor these animal allies as embodiments of cosmic forces. And another thing I want to bring up too is like animal sacrifice. Like animal sacrifice, I think would totally fall into this category of animal familiars. You're using the soul of an animal for magic, right? We're using our souls to intertwine. I keep getting this like vision of like us and all of these animals like French braiding ourselves. But that's literally what it is, babe. It's literally what it is. Okay, so I also do think we have to mention the Norse traditions of Scandinavia. Naturally, unsurprisingly, in Scandinavia, the premier doll of animal familiars was the raven. Few creatures can compete in the Norse mythology to a raven. Odin himself is said to be accompanied by two ravens, known as Hugin and Munin, whose names were thought to mean, or the names meant thought and memory. So each dawn, it is said that these two crows, these ravens, would fly across the 9 worlds, bringing back secrets to whisper into Odin's ear. To the Norse people, the raven was both a prophet and a spy, tied to death and wisdom, for where ravens fed, battle had been. Warriors saw them circling above the fields as omens that Odin watched the fight. To sorceresses, the raven represented the voice of the subconscious, a familiar who carried messages from the unseen realms. Mm. And then, of course, unsurprisingly, the other animal familiars of the Norse tradition were the bear, the stag, the serpent, and the cat. Like, these are all the same fucking animals. Like, this is like copy and paste essentially from every single tradition. Depending on like what part of the world, the animal might slightly change depending on what's around. But like, come on. So the bear, known as Bjorn, was revered as the embodiment of raw force and divine masculinity. Often Norse clans claimed that they descended from bears, believing that their ancestors had once taken human form to walk among their kin. And what's so crazy is that also in the Siberian tradition, they believed the same. Do you remember? They believed that their grandfathers were the bears. Like, what? Like, come on. They also had people known as the berserkers. This name comes from the direct meaning a bear shirt. These are people who would enter trance-like furies in battle, invoking the bear spirit as a familiar for war. They were said to feel no pain, to growl like beasts, to tear shields with their bare hands. Also, healers would use bears as guardians of thresholds, the protectors of the sleeping and the sick. Like, this is, I'm telling you, like, this is giving me chills. This is just all the same in every part of the world. It's all the fucking same. Then, of course, there's the stag. The stag is the keeper of the forest secrets, the liminal creature who walked between the wild and the divine. There was known to be four great stags, known as Dain, Davalin, Dunir, and Durapror. I'm probably saying those wrong. Whoopsies. These four stags were said to live in Yggdrasil, the world tree, feeding upon its leaves. Their antlers, ever shedding, ever regrowing, symbolizing the cycle of life, death, and renewal. Like, like, this is literally, and this reminds me of what other tradition was it? Was it the Celtic where they're like the stag antlers are considered to be part of the world tree? Like, this is all the same. Then, of course, the Norse believed that the serpent was the knowledge and hidden power of the multiverse. The serpent in the Norse mythology slithers through every layer of the cosmos. The world serpent, known as Jormungandr, coils around Midgard, biting its own tail. We talked about this in the serpent episode, right? But again, these are like all the same symbols from culture to culture, these ideas of animal spirits that are, in a sense, like almost more powerful than us, and we can just tune into them. We can tap into them. We can merge with them. And then, of course, there is the cat in the North's tradition. Freyja's familiar was known as the velvet snow. Get out of here. The goddess Freyja, who is the mistress of magic and love, rode a chariot drawn by two giant cats. These were not domestic pets, but sacred companions, symbols of independence, sensuality, and psychic knowledge. Cats were believed to guard the home of the benevolent spirits and to protect a witch's seed, which is her spiritual essence. In later centuries, when the image of the witch became demonized, Freyja's cats became the model for the black cat familiar. See, I'm telling you. And this is kind of where I want to jump into. I feel like I could like talk for another 3 hours about this, but I do think it's important to talk about why and when all of this changed. And you know where we're going to go. You know where we're going. Yep. Christianification of Europe. Europe was a land of nomadic tribes, of indigenous tribes who lived off the land. They talked to spirits and they talked to plants. And through colonization, and even more specifically, the colonization of belief, which is modern day Christianity, all of these things became demonized and associated with paganism or Satan, right? But essentially, once Christianity took over Europe, and now we're in the Dark Ages, people really feared this idea of animal familiars. And I think that's where we get this idea, this stereotype of like witches using animals for like dark spell casting. So from roughly the 1300s through the 1600s in Europe, this is the height of the witch trials. Familiars were considered to be living proof of a witch's pact with the devil. Yep. The church taught that demons could assume animal form to help witches cast spells, harm neighbors, and spread disease. And this is also, I think, really crucial. Like, to associate animals with evil is also separating us from nature. I was talking about this in the serpent episode, but this idea, um, I listened to an interpretation in the book Autobiography of a Yogi. An Indian Swami, a man from India, a Swami, reinterprets Genesis as an allegory for Kundalini energy. And one of the things he said in this book, which I found to be so powerful, is that an animal is always an ally. An animal is never a face of a demonic entity. An animal is always an ally because it's a part of nature. So if an animal tells you something, it never lies. And I think that's so, I find that to be true. I think that is true. Animals are allies. But the fact that in medieval Europe, the Christian church is teaching you that animals are doing the work of the devil. Like, think about how much that would have you fear nature and thus separate you from nature. So, it was believed that animal familiars would deliver curses or illnesses. They would suck the blood of witches because they would basically need to feed. They were basically vampires. They would act as messengers or scouts, so specifically crows and cats would be able to spy or overhear confessions on behalf of the witches. And they believed that animal familiars would enhance magical powers. Specifically, toads and snakes were believed to store venomous energy later used in potions. They believed that witches would summon their familiars by whispering their secret names, and they would appear often on trial records. So they're not just persecuting women. Like, this is important to remember. During the witch trials, they're not just murdering women for being witches, they would also murder their pets. Maybe a woman literally just like greeted a frog one day and they're like, yeah, we're going to murder the frog. Like, they were murdering animals too. And this is important to remember. And they were also like demonizing plants. They were literally like certain plants would be considered part of witchcraft. So this is not just an attack on humanity. It's an attack on all the natural world. Hot take. So essentially, they would burn animals alongside their quote convicted witches. In the 13th century, in France, cats were thrown into midsummer bonfires as a part of St. John's Eve rituals, a Christianized echo of the older fertility rites. By the 14th century, cats were so despised that their near extermination contributed to Europe's rodent explosion. Think about that. Cats were so demonized because they were associated with witchcraft and they killed so many cats that the rodent population exploded, and we all know what came from that. The fucking bubonic plague. Like what? Like what? Like what? And I actually think like this is such an important takeaway with the power of belief. Like, I just want you to think about how deep this is. In medieval Europe, they're obsessing over death and darkness. Oh, these witches are going to kill us. They're going to curse us. They're going to bring sickness. They're obsessing over sickness, curses, death, large death numbers, right? So, in a weird way, they manifested that by being obsessed with somebody cursing them and causing illness on a mass scale. They murdered all the cats and then created a rodent population that supported a fucking plague. So like you actually, I mean like the power of belief, babe. If you want to be cursed with illness enough, you'll manifest it. That's the takeaway here. Jesus. So unsurprisingly, during the plague years, the church reversed some of their blessings. So people would hang cats in the front of the town gates, believing that they carried Satan's miasma. Miasma. I don't know that word. Miasma. Miasma. Wait, no, I want this to be in English, please. In English. Okay, miasma is a highly unpleasant or unhealthy smell or vapor. Why have I never heard that word before? How did I get that in my notes? Sometimes I do copy and paste sentences from other sites, so pardon me. Okay, but this is insane. So now people during the bubonic plague are hanging dead cats outside of the gates of their city, thinking that it would scare away Satan, not realizing that if they had just kept that cat alive, it would have just killed more rodents. And that's all they needed. And like this is what I'm saying. The natural world is all you need, babe. Keep the natural world alive. Also during this time, they had what were known as hare hunts. They believed that witches would turn into rabbits or hares. And so if they saw a hare running near a sick person's house, they would often shoot or stone it to death. Great. They also would mutilate toads. Of course they did. Toads would be found near wells, and they would crush them or burn them alive. Their bodies hung above doors to ward off the bewitched. Ironically, these dried toads became charms for they became associated with magic. Like, how twisted is this? Because for so many years they would burn them or dry them above their doors to scare away witches. They then became symbols of witches. Like, this is just so psychotic. This is just fucking. And like, I think about this all the time, but we are still living with the legacy of medieval Europe. Like, so many of these things are still echoing with our day-to-day practices. And I think the biggest example is the black cats. During this time, it was believed that if a black cat crossed your path, it meant bad luck because it might be a witch in disguise. However, sailors believed the opposite. They believed that if a black cat was aboard your ship, it meant that you'd be protected from storms because the cat was a guardian and a window between worlds. And like, this is what I'm saying. Like, this is the issue with the Christianification of the world. They were always seen as a window between worlds. And then once that was seen as pagan, now they're demonic. Also, hilariously enough, Christians believe that owls were also omens of death. In older pagan lore, the owl was the bird of the wise and the powerful. And then, of course, Christianity makes this sinister, dark prophecy. And then, of course, with ravens, they believed that ravens would carry the souls to hell to announce their arrival. And then, of course, I did bring up the black dog, and black dogs were considered guardians of the underworld in almost every part of the world. And then through Christianity, were considered demons that would foretell death. They were like the Grim Reaper. So, like, in a nutshell, I really just want to leave you with this thought, like this belief, like, how much colonization have you taken in on animals? And it could be really little, right? Like, oh, I don't want this in my house, like I'm afraid of it. But like, how much do we fear nature? I guess that's what I'm getting at. How much do we fear nature? How much do we demonize animals? Even some of us who love animals, we fear them. We're trained from a young age that if we see an animal, that we should fear it. But our ancestors were not taught those things. They were not taught to fear animals. They were taught to respect them. But I don't know if you've spent time swimming in the ocean. Like, I've swam in the ocean and I've made eye contact with sharks. I was a child, so I just wasn't afraid, and the sharks didn't care. And I think about that a lot. Like, what if you carry no fear? What if you carry no fear and you carry love and respect? What type of world does that create? The Europeans manifested a plague because they were so obsessed with curses and illness. They manifested a plague. What if we could manifest the opposite? What if we could tap back into our ancestral knowledge of loving animals, of loving plants, and interweaving our consciousness together? That would be monumental. That is my dream. That is what I want for us. I want us to love this earth. I want us to respect this earth as a mega consciousness and to think of ourselves as a mini consciousness, interweaving ourselves into the whole. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate you. I hope you have the most beautiful day, and I hope that you interweave your consciousness with the things you love most in the natural world. Over and out.